It's my privilege to introduce a true champion, Social Security, Medicare, who's fighting for all of us, Senator Bob Casey.
Thanks so much. So am I the third senator to speak? Third, okay. I just want to make sure where we are in the order. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, because this is a critically important time for our country. We're obviously debating a lot of issues that you're reading about just in the next number of hours and days, but we can't lose sight of some of the debates that and some of the decisions we're going to have to make that will affect people's lives directly because of how we fund government agencies, especially those agencies of government that help us provide the kind of benefits that, frankly, some of us have taken for granted and only recently, because of the threats posed, are focusing on more and more. There was very little attention paid in the last year to the debates about the federal budget because of all of the engagement we had, all of the debates and real fights about health care, about tax policy, about nominations, and so many other things. I'm hoping that this year can be a year when we can focus more intensively on some of the proposed cuts to the federal budget, cuts that would only be proposed by extreme right-wing politicians. In the case of the Social Security Administration, it starts with one word, the word promise. Social Security is a promise that we have to keep to the American people. It's also an earned benefit. So when politicians casually talk about cutting Social Security or cutting the Social Security Administration or not keeping up with funding, they have a lot of explaining to do because it is a promise and it is an earned benefit. For some reason, I don't quite know why, not sure I ever will know why, Republicans spent the last year obsessed with, and I would argue it was a maniacal obsession with cutting health care, basically by decimating Medicaid, and the other obsession was giving tax cuts to the super rich and big corporations. I will never understand those two basic obsessions. But unfortunately, not being satisfied with what they tried to do in 2017, and were somewhat successful, obviously, in the context of the tax cuts to the super rich and corporations, now they want to embark on a new project in 2018. That's what they call, by reference to two words, they talk about entitlement, quote, entitlement reform. Well, when I hear those two words, I know what they mean. That means cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid. They may use that phrase, entitlement reform, but that's really what they mean, cutting all three. And I thought I heard a presidential candidate, can't remember his name, who made promise after promise that he would not cut Social Security, would not cut Medicare, would not cut Medicaid. And yet he and they, this administration and this Congress, have proposed over and over again to cut all three in one way or the other, or to at least change these programs in one way or another. So that obsession continues, and of course it has its foundation in cutting government. So it should be no surprise that when a budget comes along and an appropriations bill comes along, that there'll be proposed cuts by Republicans across the board. So here we are with yet another attempt to cut government by cutting Social Security. I know a good bit about government programs. I was the Auditor General of Pennsylvania for 8 years and the State Treasurer for 2. My job was to examine government programs, make sure that they are following the law, and making determinations about whether they are efficient and effective. So I don't need a lecture from some Republican politician about how government should work. I did a lot to expose when government didn't work. And every government agency should be held accountable if it's not working. But this arbitrary, across-the-board obsession with cutting often leads to dire consequences for real people. And if you think the Social Security Administration isn't critically important to delivering Social Security benefits, then you probably haven't been paying attention. And when you, under the guise of cutting or some other argument, refuse to support increases to the Social Security Administration, you're cutting Social Security. You're harming beneficiaries, and you're making this country a lesser country than it should be. We're a great country. We can have the strongest military in the world, which we do, the strongest economy in the world, which we have, and we can also take care of people and keep our promises. So that means taking care of folks that need Medicaid, whether they're children in urban or rural areas, whether that's making sure that Medicaid is there for children with disabilities or adults with disabilities, and making sure that Medicaid is there for folks who need to get into a nursing home. We can do all that and still protect those programs. And we can also keep our promise, a sacred promise, on Social Security. But instead, what the majority keeps going back to is this obsession, this maniacal obsession with giving rich people more money and cutting government programs, and sometimes doing it in the most pernicious way possible, cutting the funding for the offices or the agencies, thereby reducing the likelihood that that agency or that office can deliver the benefit, can fulfill the promise. So we're going to fight very hard. We'd rather work together. We'd rather have bipartisan agreements. But if Republicans want to fight about Social Security the entire year, we are ready for that fight. We will fight morning, noon, and night on these if they want to do that. We're hoping they don't. We're hoping they set aside that obsession, even though they have one-party rule in Congress. We hope that they will get off that obsession, work with us to make sure that Social Security is always there for the beneficiaries who earned it, instead of this path they've been on, which is cut, slash, divide and conquer, and demonize and divide. That's pretty much what they've been up to. So I'm grateful for the work that so many organizations represented here are doing every day to support Social Security, to support programs that benefit so many Americans. And I know you have been in the fight with us. You will be in the fight with us. And I'm glad and honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Thanks very much.